relate to Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins can't relate to Diggs. And I think it's the same way with Adam Thielen. I think if Thielen wasn't a Minnesota boy and didn't sign this contract, I think he'd be a lot more vocal too about this quarterback. Because he's the hometown guy and he wants to be a Viking forever. He grew up as a Viking. He doesn't want to leave, obviously. I think it's different with Stefon Diggs. You've heard rumors his whole career. Oh, he wants to go play in Washington. He wants to go home and play for Washington. That fantasy that I think a lot of Viking fans looked at, oh man, he's not going to go to Washington. It's becoming more and more realistic that Stefon Diggs might not want to be here because of this quarterback. And can you blame him? Can you blame a guy who comes from Washington with $84 million, who's scared to throw the ball down the field because of his numbers might go down? Can you blame Stefon Diggs? 13-3 with Case Keenum. Case Keenum was able to relate to Thielen. He was able to mesh with Stefon Diggs. They were all three of them took the same path to the NFL, proving people wrong again and again and again, clawing and scratching their way onto a roster, working their tail off. Case Keenum, week to week, Zimmer doesn't even give him the starting nod week to week. We'll see who we're going to start Sunday. These guys needed to prove it. These guys loved each other. Thielen, Diggs, Keenum, that trio, they were built differently. They had a great relationship with each other. And I guarantee if they had to do it over again, those two would advocate, if they didn't already, 10 times more to bring back Case Keenum because of the way they were able to do it. I watched a couple interviews on Diggs and Thielen when they talked about Case Keenum. Their eyes lit up when they talked about him. When Dan Patrick asked Adam Thielen, man, what makes Case Keenum all of a sudden have this great... Thielen eyes lights up. He goes, I've never seen a guy prepared more in my life than Case Keenum. You almost had to tell the guy, dude, you got a family. Go home. This football stuff, it's a lot, but it's not everything. Stefon Diggs, this is a quote, I've never seen a guy more prepared. He was more prepared than the coaches. That's what Stefon said about Case Keenum. You put Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs in front of a microphone and they ask about Kirk Cousins, you might want to plug your ears because it's going to get ugly what you're going to hear, if we were being honest. So before we blame Stefon Diggs about him being a baby and all this kind of stuff, let's look at the deeper picture of this. And this is just a simple case of Stefon Diggs, Adam Thielen, they just don't get along with Kirk Cousins. You've got two Toyota Avalons, and you got a bright black shiny Cadillac. It doesn't look right. Stay with us. Steve Torre from SiriusXM Channel 82, host of Dog Day Sports. He will be on in just a second here. He'll help us break down the Yankees-Twins series, what to watch out for, the X Factors, and all that good stuff coming up next year. Don't leave here on the Strom Sports Show. And we're joined here by Steve Torre, the host of Dog Day Sports on SiriusXM 82. He was also my boss when I interned for Mad Dog Sports Radio. He's a mentor of mine, and I couldn't be more excited to have him on to help preview the Yankees-Twins series. Steve, how are you today? Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Steve, it's my pleasure. Great to see some good things happening for you. Happy to see you.
I appreciate that. And this is a huge series, obviously, for both teams. I wanted to first ask you this. As a Yankee fan, because I know how a Twins fan feels when they play the Yankees, or the bully that never seems to leave the school. As a Yankee fan, I heard you on Doggy's Update a few days ago that you were still nervous. What worries you about this Twins team and why? The Yankees have owned the Twins, winning 13 of their last 15 postseason games.
Well, I mean, to me, it's pretty simple, Steve, honestly. I mean, when I hear people say that the Yankees never beat the Twins, or the Twins never beat the Yankees in the postseason traditionally, that may be true. But, I mean, this roster turnover it's obvious. I mean, this isn't even close to the same team that they beat in the wild card game 2 years ago that won, 85 games? It's a team that won over 100 games this year, and they mash up and down the lineup. And anybody that watched the three-game series in July in Minnesota when the Yankees did take 2 out of 3, granted, but I could not find one pitcher in that series, and I mean this, that for the Yankees that were able to get the Twins hitters out consistently. I mean, no matter who was out there. And that lineup scares me. And all you have to do is look at the numbers. If you don't believe it, they're seeing that 8 guys had at least 20 home runs this year. They mash up and down that lineup, and they can offset relievers because there are some switch hitters in there, and they're very dangerous. And when facing the Twins, and I say this honestly, this isn't me just trying to protect myself and being, a typical pessimistic fan, but I honestly don't think any lead is safe. Now, I know the playoffs are a different animal. The Yankees on paper have the edge in the pitching department, particularly in the bullpen. I understand all that, but I look at the Twins roster and I see a different Twins team, and I just do not think it's going to be the cakewalk that a lot of people envision.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I said the same exact thing about this series. I don't believe any lead is safe. I don't care if the Twins jump out to a 3-0 lead. We saw that really the last time they faced each other in the wild card, but I think especially with these two lineups, and the pitching is obviously the weak point here, so we'll keep an eye on that. Let's get into just some... I was personally surprised that Paxton is going for Game 1. Are you surprised that it's Paxton, Tanaka, and then Severino? Any surprises there in the pitching rotation?
Not really, to be honest with you. I mean, there was some speculation and there were some rumblings that maybe they would go with Severino in Game 1. I didn't think that was a smart move. I understood the line of thinking because, you have a rested bullpen with all these days off after the regular season, so if you think he can give you 4 innings, then, you're loaded from your arms out of the bullpen. But if you start Severino in Game 1, that means you expect him, if the series extends, that he's going to have to come back in 4 or 5. And after pitching about 14 innings this year, I don't think that that's enough of a workload, and I don't think he's ready for that. So, Paxton has been their best pitcher down the stretch. He had that situation in his last regular season start with the nerve damage in his glute, which forced him to be removed after 1 inning against the Rangers, which had Yankee land in complete panic, thinking the worst. But they say he's physically checked out, and you can't argue with what he's done down the stretch. Now, this is his first postseason start. How he reacts to that, who knows? I would have been fine with Tanaka, but I like the combination either way of Paxton, Tanaka 1-2. This way Severino can empty the tank in 1 start in Game 3, and then need be you have Paxton and Tanaka on the back end of the series if it extends to 4 or 5. So I was okay with it. And the other thing you have to remember, when you're talking about Yankee starters, they are the philosophy of they're not going to let a starter see that lineup more than twice. So you're going to go to your bullpen basically every day. So I don't really think it matters. Paxton might go 4 innings tonight. He might go 5. Maybe if he's shutting them down, they give him a chance to go through the lineup for a 3rd time, which I doubt, even if it's going to be like 9-3 Yankees. It really, to be honest with you, I don't really think there's much of a difference. So I'm okay with how they designed the starting rotation.
Okay. We're here with Steve Torre from SiriusXM. I want to take a look at the managers for a second. I've already pointed out to multiple people that these teams are very similar of how this season went. Both had to overcome injuries. Both have incredible lineups. You had the Twins who had 307 home runs, Yankees with 306. I want to take a look at the managers because that's also eerily similar. The Yankees got to the ALCS, fired Girardi. That was kind of a surprise to people, bringing Aaron Boone. The Twins get to the playoffs with Paul Molitor. He wins AL Manager of the Year. He struggled his next year because of the injuries, and then they fire him, bring in this new Rocco Baldelli, like everyone's bringing in the new younger coach. I want to look at these two. Rocco's in his first year. Could this be a case where Aaron Boone, now in his 2nd postseason, even though he struggled last year, is this an instance where Boone maybe has the edge over Rocco Baldelli? Do you think this is going to be kind of... these decisions are going to be magnified, and Boone's got the edge over here?
I think you could make that argument. I think in Boone's case in particular, if you look back to last year's postseason and the division series against the Red Sox, when in the moment he was criticized heavily for letting his starting pitchers in both Games 3 and 4 stay in too long, whether it was Severino in Game 3 and Sabathia in Game 4 against the Red Sox, rather than going to the bullpen. And in that moment, he failed. It's because you can match up and have an idea of a blueprint and how things are going to go. And if they don't, and all of a sudden in the moment you've got to manage on the fly, then sometimes you get crumbled. So I think he learned from that. I think he'll probably have more of a quick trigger this time around. And does that give him an edge because he's had some experience over Baldelli? I mean, I guess theoretically it could. But, if the Twins swing the bats and the Yankees don't hit, and the Twins, are beating up on the Yankees in this series, and bullpen, making moves to match up with certain guys doesn't come into play as much, and the Twins win the series in 4, Is that going to mean Rocco Baldelli outmanaged Aaron Boone? I mean,
right.
I think, certainly you want experience, obviously, in all aspects. I think if you've been through it before, whether you're a player, manager, whatever it is, certainly it helps. You know what to expect. But once you sort of get through that, the first few innings, it's like any other baseball game, right? I mean, certainly certain things are magnified late in the game, and you wonder how an individual is going to respond coming out of the bullpen, and if he's going to melt in a key spot. And he's been great statistically over the years, but let's see him when, this first and third with one out and you're trying to protect the lead. Let's see him do that, and that's fair. So, but, to go back to your original question, I think Boone certainly learned from his mistakes last year. So if you want to tell me he's got a little more experience and he's got the edge over Baldelli, sure. But bottom line is it always comes down to the players too a lot of times. Let's not forget that.
And we're here with Steve Torre from SiriusXM. Yes, I would agree with that. Let's go back to what you were saying in the beginning about this series. The season series was incredible. The Yankees won it 4-2, but both clubs combined for 28 home runs in 6 games. You had an 8-6 game, a 14-12 game, a 10-7 game. I don't want to sound like an immature fan here, but is this series just going to come down to who hits more home runs?
I mean, it could, until another pattern's developed. I don't know how we can think otherwise, The thing with the Twins, and yes, the Yankees might have the edge in the bullpen, and a lot of people, whoever it is, any expert out there, or how you're going to analyze and prognosticate this series, I think a lot of people are saying, if the Yankees get to that 5th, 6th inning with the lead, they have a decided edge. And that may be the case. But if you make mistakes to this lineup, and, whether any of the Yankee starters, whether it's Paxton today, and he went through a stretch, Steve, during the course of the year, and he straightened it out in his last 10 starts. But he went through a stretch where first innings were a nightmare for him. And if he sort of goes back to that pattern tonight, and, puts the Yankees in a 2-0 hole, all that's going to do is give the Twins some juice, you know what I mean? And so I think it's important, obviously, you always want to play with a lead, but particularly in the Yankee case, when you consider the lethal capability of that Twins lineup, you want to play with the lead and hope that your bullpen can lock it down. And the other thing you're concerned about from a Yankee perspective is, they're going to be relying on their bullpen a lot. And when you do that and you have to try to rely on multiple guys, there are going to be nights where one guy might not have it. So if it's protecting a 1-run lead or if it's a tie game late, the Yankees on paper might have edge and they've got most of their payroll locked up into the bullpen, a lot of it anyway. Still, you know what I mean? When you're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, and in some cases as many as 7 or 8 guys, and if you only want your starter to even go face that lineup once or, 1.5 times, that means you're going to go to the bullpen a lot. And, some nights it'll work. You might have enough of a cushion where it's no problem. You have a margin for error, or even if you're trying to protect just a 1-run lead, you might have all 6 guys be lights out. And it could carry you for a series, maybe 2 series. But eventually having to rely on that all the time, chances are to be perfect is those odds aren't with you a lot of times.
Now, to make you feel better, I know you're talking about Paxton and how he struggled. Jose Barreros, who I didn't want starting game 1, I wanted Jake Odorizzi to start, but Jose Barreros went through a really, really tough stretch in the month of July and August. You probably already know that. So I was an advocate to start Jake Odorizzi, and if Twins fans like to make the case, Barreros has been so good down the stretch, well, go look at the schedule that they played the last 18 games. They played the god-awful Chicago White Sox, Kansas City Royals, Detroit Tigers, so that's definitely something to look out for. Yes, he did. He did. He had that one good start. Let's talk about, really quickly, 2 more left for you. Both teams have really had to battle injury, as I mentioned. They found younger players that have just turned out to be great. I mean, for the Twins, it's been Luis Ariz, who I just saw is active on the roster. He sprained his ankle. And for the Yankees, Gio Urshela, talk a little bit about how injuries at times, listen, it's obviously hard for teams, but when you discover these new players, how important is that for a franchise?
Oh, it's a lift, all right. I mean, especially when you mentioned Urshela, it's pretty amazing, and the Twins through and through, and for people that, didn't follow the Yankees on a day-to-day basis, and, you're probably aware that they went through a whole bunch of injuries, and there's not a lot of teams that could overcome this for what they did. And sometimes you got to get lucky, but, finding like a Gio Urshela who basically cost them $25,000, honestly. That's a true story. I mean, he was let go by the Indians, picked up by the Blue Jays, and designated for assignment, and the Yankees picked him up for $25,000 and signed him to a minor league contract. And he's come into his own now, which is remarkable. And he always had the reputation